Howdy. My name is Melody Allen. I'm a follower of Christ, native Texan, a wife, Texas Aggie, Bible study leader, Christian conservative political activist, and the host of the Patriots Revival podcast. Here on Patriots Revival, we share the good news of Christ and discuss the current political climate in relationship to truth and God's Word. In doing so, we hope to educate, inspire, and encourage Christian conservatives to make a radical return to God's Word as it relates to politics and every aspect of life. And we hope to get folks involved to help restore God to government. We've got dust on the Bible, so we need a revival, a Patriots Revival. Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of Patriots Revival. You may notice that our set is a little bit different, and I'm excited to tell you that we have use of a studio in Waxahachie, Texas, which is where I reside, in which we use for when we are recording episodes with guests in person. So that's the reason why our set looks a little bit different today as compared to previous episodes. Now, this is also our very first episode of the local show. If you listen to our outro on all of our previous episodes, I've talked about how we will have other episodes in the future in which we will talk about local events, especially if you're here locally in Ellis County, about ways for you to get involved, candidates and events. So this is the very first episode of one of our local shows. And with that, when we record episodes for the local show, I want to share with you a calendar of events, ways that you can get involved. And first of all, we have coming up Thursday, January 25th, the Ellis County Republican Women, of which I'm involved in. We are sponsoring a candidate forum, and that again is Thursday, January 25th. That will be held at the Waxahachie Civic Center, located at 2000 Civic Center Drive in Waxahachie. And that will start at 6 p.m. There will be a meet and greet, and we have various local candidates at the county level who will be present. There may even be some for state offices that will be present. And from 6 to 7, there will be a meet and greet, and each candidate will have a table set up with their literature, and you can come in and actually meet these candidates and talk to them. So that is a joint venture with KBEC Radio, and it will be broadcast live from 7 to 9 p.m. So check that out. I encourage you to attend that. Also, we have the Ellis County GOP that meets on the first Tuesday of the month. So their next meeting will be on February 6th. That's at 6:30 p.m. at the Enchanted Point, which is located at 1511 Ovilla Road in Waxahachie. And then, of course, the next meeting of the Ellis County Republican Women, we meet on the second Tuesday of each month, and that will be at 6:30 p.m. at 412 South Rogers Street Suite. And each month at the Ellis County Republican Women meetings, we have a guest speaker, and I'm very excited about our next guest speaker. Her name is Sheena Rodriguez, and she is the president of Alliance for a Safe Texas. And that is a group that is strong on securing our borders, stopping sex trafficking. And Sheena's going to come on and talk a little bit about securing our border, and more specifically, child care facilities for unaccompanied minors and what happens whenever those minors cross the border and how they can just get lost in the system. So you don't want to miss that. And Sheena, just going to tease, Sheena will be an upcoming guest on Patriots Revival podcast as well. So getting into today's episode, and actually the next two episodes, this week we are interviewing Lindy Beaty, who is running for Ellis County District Attorney. I'm very excited for you to hear her story about why she's running and why she's doing this. And I want you to check out this episode. It will be a 2-part series. So you've got this episode that will air now. Part 2 will be next week. So without further ado, here's my interview with Lindy Beaty, the Republican candidate for Ellis County District Attorney. Stay tuned. Welcome, Lindy, to Patriots Revival podcast. I'm glad that you decided to join us today. Let's go ahead and get started and tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your family, your background. Just maybe share a little bit of information about yourself with everybody.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate this opportunity to talk to your viewers. But I'm originally from San Antonio.
Okay.
That's home for me. I went to high school there. I went to college there. Ultimately, I went to law school in Houston.
Okay.
Then I came back home after I finished law school. And I honestly never wanted to be a prosecutor. I wanted to do healthcare law. My undergraduate degree is in biology.
Okay.
So I wanted to have that, sort of link there. But I had a friend that was working at the Atascosa County Attorney's Office, which is a tiny, tiny county south of San Antonio. And she called me up one day and said, "Hey, we need another prosecutor here. Do you want to come?" And I said, "No." Why would I want to do criminal law, And she said, "No, it's fun. It's great." So I went, I interviewed, I got the job, and I loved it.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. At that time, we were doing misdemeanor cases, we were doing juvenile cases, and handling a little bit of commissioner's court, a little bit of civil stuff then.
Okay.
And it was great. I loved interacting with law enforcement, just being in the courtroom all the time. It was a great learning curve for me, a big learning curve, because like I said, I didn't really do a lot of criminal law in law school. That wasn't my focus. So I did get a lot of help from not only law enforcement down there, but from the defense attorneys that were there. They were very helpful to me because I really didn't know what I was doing at the beginning. I lost the first 5 trials I ever did. And so I thought, I'm terrible at this. This will not be what I want to do.
Right.
But after I got the hang of it, I started to be, really good at it and enjoyed it so much. And I would have never left that county. I loved it so much. I like small counties, small towns.
How does that county compare to Ellis County, would you say, in regards to the size?
Super small. So
Small.
at that time, I think the population for the whole county was 38,000 people. So
that is
super
small.
tiny, real small, big in terms of land, but
Yes.
small population because it's very rural.
Yeah.
So I told my boss, at that time I was making $29,000 a year. I had over $100,000 in student loans that I needed to pay off. So, it just wasn't feasible to stay there. So I went in and I told my boss, I said, "Look, I would love to stay here, but I just financially I can't, And he says, "I completely understand, you need to go somewhere else, So he wrote a letter of recommendation for me to take on interviews. So I thought that was very nice of him. So I was looking for jobs. I found an ad for a juvenile prosecutor in Ellis County. And honestly, I had no idea where that was. So I had to look it up. I looked it up on a map and I said, "Oh, I've been through it on my way to Dallas, when I was going down 30. So I applied. I had an interview. It was right around Labor Day, September of 2004.
Okay.
So I came down here. I interviewed with the DA, then Joe Grubbs, for that position. When I turned around and went home, he offered me the position on my way home. I said, "I will take it."
You didn't even make it home.
Yeah.
Already had That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. So it was very nice. So I said, "Yeah, I'll take it."
Yeah.
So I moved up here not knowing anybody because my entire family is in San Antonio.
Yeah.
So I said, "Let's do this," So I came up here on my own.
I guess your family was supportive. They were understanding.
Yeah, they were understanding. My family's very close. So when I grew up in San Antonio, I come from I wouldn't say a large Hispanic family, but fairly large. And we all lived next door to each other. So I grew up to where my house was here. And then my grandparents lived next door to us. My aunt and uncle lived next door to them. I was. We all lived in the compound. And then my other aunt and uncle lived next door to them.
Right.
So it was fantastic growing up because we had family all the time. Right. So we were always having dinners, birthday parties all the time. I saw my grandparents almost every day. So it was fantastic growing up. That was the best environment to be able to grow up in.
Yeah.
And so I was going to miss that, right? Because I really liked that. But at the same time, I wanted to be an adult on my own and do things. So, and I like new things, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of scary to go where you don't know anybody.
Yeah.
And you don't know if you're going to like the job. You don't know if you're going to like your coworkers, So you just hope for the best and pray that things go well.
Yep.
And that it's meant to be. So I came here in September of 2004, moved to Waxahachie, and ended up loving it here. It was really great. Again, I like that the county was somewhat smaller than being in, Dallas or any place like that. It was a very welcoming atmosphere at the DA's office then. We all got along really well because there's a lot of us that were about the same age. We were all kind of single then, so we got to hang out after work. So I did juvenile prosecution for about 10 months. Then I transferred to the felony division. I started doing low-level felonies like state jails, third degrees like DWIs, low-level drug cases. And then I transferred over to doing and prosecuting the child sex crime cases.
Oh.
So I did that solely. I was the only one doing that for about 4 years. So
Wow.
that's kind of what I was doing day in and day out. Those cases are extremely rewarding to do. They're also very challenging.
Why would you say those are rewarding cases to do?
Because unlike, if you have like a murder case, that person is deceased, right?
Mhm.
And the family has to live with that. When you have a child sex crime, that child lives with that forever. So it's a continuing process for them, right? It's not like you can just sort of grieve the situation and get over it. It's something that does follow them lifelong, and it affects their family.
Yeah.
Sometimes it disrupts the entire family, right? If it's a family member, which most of the time it is, somebody has to get out of the house, right? Or something like that. And not everybody believes this person. So that causes a lot of trauma within the family. So, those are very challenging, but you also very rewarding when you can take somebody out of the community that's done that to a child.
Yeah.
It's very
Get them off
rewarding.
the street.
For sure. It's very rewarding in that regard. They're very mentally exhausting too. And
I bet.
a lot of people don't realize that prosecutors, much like law enforcement officers, do get secondary trauma from seeing that sort of day in and day out. I mean, it completely changes you when you are looking at those cases and reading about and hearing about and seeing things that are being done to children, right? And there's no excuse. You can always come up with an explanation as to why somebody was mad enough to maybe murder somebody, right? The heat of passion.
Right.
There's no excuse. There's no explanation ever as to why a person would do that to a child.
Yeah.
Like you can't come up with one that anybody would say, oh, that makes sense.
Right.
So that's why those are the most challenging. So I did that for about 4 years. Then I started to we were growing at that point. Ellis County was just growing. So it became too much for any one person to do. So we sort of had to spread all the crimes around, if you will. So started doing general felonies, whether it was sex crimes, murders, drugs, it was kind of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Then in 2014, I became the chief misdemeanor prosecutor. So I did that for about a year and a half. Then I came back to be the chief felony prosecutor.
Okay.
And I did that until I left the DA's office in 2019. When I left, I was the chief felony prosecutor in Judge Carroll's courts. And then from 2019 to now, I have my own law firm with a partner. We do criminal defense. So it's been interesting to kind of see the other side of the coin, if you will, in doing defense work.
So what made you make the transition from the DA's office to having a private practice?
Yeah. It was a very hard decision. I honestly didn't know if I was going to be able to do it, right? Like I had done prosecution for 18 and a half years at that point. That's all I had done in my career, and now to go to the other side.
Yeah.
So, I had to think long and hard about whether I could do it, because if I'm going to do it, I want to make sure that I'm doing right by my clients as well.
Sure.
They deserve to have an attorney that's going to work hard for them, and believe in them. But the reason we both left was because at that time we had kids who were younger in age. They were both about the same age, about 9.
Yeah.
And the thing about working at a DA's office, it is not a 9 to 5 job. It is, coming early, it's leaving late, working on weekends. When you're doing prosecution, you just have to, number one, to keep up with the volume. And 2, you also want to do a good job. And if you have a trial coming up, you really need to prepare for that trial. And so, we just didn't have enough family time.
Yeah.
So we both decided to make that switch because we were never going to get that time back, with our kids. So we went to the defense and we worked just as hard, if not harder than we did at the DA's office. We just have flexibility of time. So I can go, we could go on a school field trip on a Wednesday in the middle of the day. Because we didn't have to work. We would just make up that time somewhere else, And so that part's been really great about being on the defense side.
Right. So if you made the switch from the DA's office to private practice in criminal defense, and you did so because you had that time flexibility, why go back to that more demanding schedule that you talked about? Maybe let us know, why are you wanting to make the shift back into the district attorney's office?
Right. So, my passion has always been prosecution. It always is. I think other defense attorneys will even tell you that too. Not that I don't do a good job, because I do believe I do a really good job on the defense side as well. But a couple of things. My kids are older now, right? Not that they don't need me as much. They don't need me as much, right? I don't need to be there. We're not doing as many field trips in high school as we were in middle school. So there's that I think is a little different now. The kids are a little bit older, more used to things, and self-sufficient in some respects. So that's part is good. And the other part too is I'm just going back because, I have not been happy with the way things have been going in the last, 3 years.
And maybe give some examples of that.
Yeah. So what we've been seeing, when we were on the other side is how long cases were taking to go through the system, right? So the DA is responsible for determining when cases get filed, how many cases get filed, what cases get filed, when the discovery gets turned over to the defense attorney, when an offer gets made on a case. So they do have a lot of control over how many cases are going through that system and in what rate. And it's very important that you have a consistent amount of cases coming into the system as going out. Otherwise, you will log jam somewhere in the system. When we had COVID was in 2020, and people think, oh, we completely shut down. We did not. We had that initial sort of shock when, the sky was falling and everybody was going to die. Right? So everybody sort of freaked out back in March of 2020. But, the judges came up with a plan pretty quickly about how we were going to handle the criminal justice system, because there are certain timelines, constitutional timelines that people need to have their cases heard, right? So the judges came up with a plan that we were going to be doing this through WebEx. It's kind of like Zoom, sort of video conferencing. And the judge's first priority was to get people who are in jail and get those cases moving. So if we could clear those people out and send them off to prison or wherever they needed to go, we were going to do those cases first. So that's how the judges started handling that. And then once we got the hang of using this WebEx, video system and how that was going to work, then we were just in court. Grand jury came back in May of 2020. That was for the felonies.
They came back in person, is what you
Yes, in May. So we were rolling along. So, COVID backed us up a little bit, but it wasn't the end of the world for us. I mean, my office, we never stopped working during any of that time frame because people were still getting arrested. They weren't getting arrested as much because people coming out that, as much, but people were still breaking around. So we were still having to go to the jail, talk to our clients, trying to get those cases moved. So we never stopped working. But then we just kept seeing, even after COVID, the cases were just taking a very long time to get indicted, or in misdemeanors just to get filed. And for me, there was no excuse for any of that because we were still rolling. So what was the holdup? In 2021, we also had 2 misdemeanor judges now because Judge Gallo, became the judge of the County Court at Law number 3. So on misdemeanor end, we had 2 judges to funnel the cases through. So there shouldn't have been a backlog. In fact, we should have been able to get more done.
Because that was a new court that was created.
It was a brand new court,
To spread all of that. So that it wasn't, we didn't have so much of a bottleneck in that one court, right?
For sure. And so you always have to dispose of more cases you take in. Otherwise, you will get backed up. And so, at least on the misdemeanor end, for sure, over the last 3 years, it's been backwards. There's been more cases filed than cases disposed of. And so that has created a big logjam effect because you have to understand, too, it's not just about filing the cases. There's only so many defense attorneys to handle those cases, right? And you can't have, defense attorneys where there's no cases, we're not doing anything, and then you put a whole bunch of cases on them.
Right.
Prior to, we were maybe getting, it wasn't unusual for us to get 8 to 10, if you were on the court appointed wheel, 8 to 10 court appointments a month. There were some months in this last year, we were getting 30 a month. That's too much, because everybody, again, deserves to have, fair treatment, to have a good defense. And that's too many cases for any one attorney to have. So what was happening then is attorneys were getting off the wheel for a time. So people would take 2 or 3 months off to catch up their cases, and then they would get back on to start again. But what that would do is during that time frame, some other defense attorney was having to take those cases, right? So it became a problem.
So let me ask you a question about that. So when you think about a defendant, then that means because they have the right to an attorney, a court-appointed attorney, correct? Those are the when you're saying on the wheel, that's what you were referring to?
Yes.
Okay.
So if someone cannot afford an attorney, if they're indigent, yes, they will get appointed an attorney. And to be on the wheel, you have to turn in an application every year. You have to have certain qualifications to either accept misdemeanors or felonies or only certain level felonies before you can take any of those cases.
Yeah.
And so then the county ends up paying us
Okay.
to represent people in that
Okay.
regard. And so, the other thing is the longer a case takes to go through the system, the more you're paying a court-appointed attorney.
What is the typical time frame it should take to go through? Is there a metric or a standard or something that's average?
I don't know that there's any, averages. I would say on a misdemeanor case, those are usually the easier cases to go through. There's not as much evidence. It's kind of, those are going to be your DWIs,
Okay.
your shoplifting cases. You're going to have assault family violence cases. Those are the main cases that you're going to see coming through misdemeanor.
Right.
Those really should be filed within, I would say 45 at the outset, 60 days of the cases being brought in by the law enforcement agency. What was happening is we were having cases being filed 18 months later. And that's a long time.
Yeah.
But, a lot of the attorneys get appointed at the front end, right? So, for that 18 months, I'm still having to talk to my client and they're wanting to check in and we're checking to see where the case is. And so every time we touch a file and do something on it, it's money.
Taxpayer money, correct?
Taxpayer money every time. Mm-hmm. So the longer that process takes, the more you end up paying in indigent defense costs.
Wow.
On the felonies, and there is only a 2-year statute of limitations on misdemeanor. So if you don't file a misdemeanor within 2 years of somebody being arrested, you cannot prosecute that case anymore. So you've got to do it within that 2-year time frame. But just to file it, you don't have to resolve the case in 2 years, but you have to file it within 2 years.
Yeah.
And so they were getting pretty close on a lot of those cases.
To hitting that.
And it's unfair. So it's unfair for a variety of reasons.
Sure.
One, it is unfair if you are a victim of crime waiting for that case. You don't know what's going on. Like,
Right.
What's happening on my case? When am I going to get justice that I want? And things change, especially on the assault family violence cases. 80% of those cases, the victim's going to not recant, but not want to go for it.
Right.
If we can get those cases early and get them maybe some assistance that they need to get through life, whether that's, housing assistance, childcare, something like that,
Sure.
we might be able to help those people a little bit more and get better prosecution.
Well, if, like, for instance, in the example that you gave where you said that those cases might be, instead of being filed, and again, just bear with me on my legal, if I'm regurgitating it correctly, maybe it should be 45 or 60 days, but these were strewn out over 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
What about the accused?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean they are sitting in a county jail as well? I'm trying to tie it to our taxpayers then, if they are sitting in the county jail awaiting a trial for those 18 months or whatever it might be, that means we are paying for the care and basically the housing of that person that's awaiting trial for a much longer period of time than it would be if these were being processed much faster. Am I interpreting that correctly?
To some extent. So most misdemeanors, most of those people are going to bond out because the bonds aren't going to be real high. They're going to be lower. And most people at some point can't afford to bond out. So they're generally not sitting in jail for that whole time length. And there's also provisions in the law too that if you don't file if someone's in custody and you don't file a misdemeanor within 15 days if it's a Class B misdemeanor or 30 days if it's a Class A misdemeanor, they can petition the court to either get a PR bond, and a PR bond is you just promise to show back up to court. There's no bail bondsman tracking you or anything like that. You just promise to show back up to court. So there's those provisions. So most of these people are out on bond, but that also creates, in my opinion, a safety issue because you do have people for DWI, for assaults, for thefts that are out on bond without having any, without having to come to court to check on their case, things like that. So they could go on for a year and a half and they think, oh, they forgot about my case. In the meantime, they're picking up low charges because nothing's happening to them. So, you have that side where things aren't going well.
Right.
So it is costly to do it that way. It's also not fair to, a defendant too. If there are people, if it's their first time they've ever been arrested, they know they did wrong, they know they're guilty, they just want to get their case done. They want to go into court, they're going to get probation, whatever needs to happen and get that started. And they were having to wait a very long time. And that causes stress to a person too. We did have some cases where we had 17-year-old kids who were getting arrested for possession of marijuana. right? And they were having to wait a year and a half for their case to get filed. Well, they went off to college now, and now they're going to college in, South Dakota or something like that. And then a year and a half later saying, oh, now you need to come back to Texas to resolve your, this possession of marijuana case. So it's just unfair all the way around
Right.
to everybody in those situations. Where it does cost money is on the felony end. So
Okay.
a lot of those people for felony cases, they can't afford to bond out, especially the more serious crimes, right? So they're going to be in there for a
Because the
while.
bond's set at a much higher
Yeah,
rate.
much higher rate, for sure. You want it to be, right?
Yeah.
Because those are more violent offenders, things like that. But even low-level drug offenders were having a hard time bonding out, and they were havting to stay in the jail for extended periods of time in the county jail before those cases were getting indicted. And that was causing a problem too. It costs $92 a day per inmate to keep them at the county jail, right? So it's a lot of money, and that's just to house and feed them.
Yeah.
We're not even talking about inmate medical costs, and that is where the true cost comes in, because taxpayers pay for anytime an inmate stubs a toe and they got to go to the hospital or a doctor's office. We pay for that.
Yeah.
If there's more serious things, like some are on dialysis, some have cardiac rehab, some are needing surgeries, some are having dental work done. That cost is skyrocketing because we don't know how much healthcare costs us that have insurance, most of them don't. And so the county is picking up that tab. So the inmate medical costs for 2023 were about $2.5 million that we are paying.
So what is that in comparison to, do you have any comparable data to a previous year or a previous term maybe?
So we're going to have to look at that. And the only reason, because that used to fall under the sheriff's budget.
Okay.
Now it's its own budget for indigent healthcare costs. So it gets lumped under that too. But I can tell
it's
you
in a different bucket.
Yeah, sort of in a different bucket, but it hasn't been that much nearly.
It's significantly higher than it has been in previous years.
Yes, because we're keeping them there longer. We're having to pay for more stuff and more serious things. The budgeted amount for the 2024 year is $5 million for that. So we have doubled the amount budgeted for inmate medical because of how many people have been sitting in our jail that cannot get out.
So it sounds like this backlog and the time frame of not getting these cases filed timely, that is definitely costing Ellis County taxpayers quite a bit.
Yes. It increases the inmate medical. It increases the budget for the sheriff to be able to house people longer. It increases the budget for the county clerks, the district clerks, when they're having to then, once the cases get rolling, get back into court, do things. So, the budget of the DA's office and the efficiencies or inefficiencies of that office affects the budgets for a lot of other people as well.
Right.
So you have to keep that, in mind. So the costs are being, extraordinary for the things that we're trying to do. And it can be done more efficiently. It absolutely can.
So how do you think you could accomplish that, Lindy?
So I think the number one reason for all of the inefficiency is the high turnover rate at the district attorney's office. Just in the last 3 years, there have been 45 employees who have left the DA's office. And that's out of a staff of 55. You're getting close to a 90% turnover rate there.
What do you think it's been, or do you have any data on what the turnover rate has been previously? Because if you're saying you're at a 90, what was the 90?
I guess it's probably 90% maybe. So 45 out of 55.
So historically, do we know what it was in previous district attorney?
I would say there hasn't been that many people leave in the last 10 years of the district attorney's office.
I'm just trying to paint the picture because I saw numbers.
I'm sure, and so that, I believe, has created all of the inefficiency.
Yeah.
Because when you have somebody leave in a position, you have to bring somebody new in, and they have to be trained before they can just sort of go on their own to do their job. That training takes anywhere from 6 to 9 months. And if you're continuously training, you're just in continuous training mode. You can never have a consistent flow of work because there's always training.
Right.
And then when you're losing people, like that, then you have people who have not been fully trained, training new people, and so you lose that sort of institutional knowledge that came with people who had been in that office for a very long time, that kind of knew how things run and where things are supposed to go, who you're supposed to call when you have this issue or that issue.
Right.
So I think that has really created the inefficiency of that office.
Okay.
And it's been clerks leaving, attorneys, investigators. It's kind of been
the whole gamut.
The whole gamut of people
Why do you think that is?
I think it's the culture. I think culture in your work environment is extremely important, right? The county pays well, but it's not, a lot of money. But we all knew that, right? I knew the whole time, the whole 15 years I worked there, if I just went up to Dallas, I could make way more money.
Yeah.
But I didn't because I lived here.
Mhm.
I was invested here. My
Yep.
family is here. I wanted to serve the community that I live in,
Right.
right? And I loved my job.
Yeah.
I loved working there. I liked the people that I worked with. It was a great environment there.
Right.
It really was. People hate it when I say family atmosphere, but it really was. And especially for me, when I came here, I didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
My work people were my work family
Sure.
and they were my family, right? I spend more time with them than I do with my other
Yep.
family anyways, right? So it's real important to create an atmosphere where people like to come to work or at least don't mind,
Right.
to be able to get things done where people are wanting to help each other get through the day or get through a case. Cause like I said, it is really a team effort. You have to understand that the clerks are vitally important to doing things, the investigators and the attorneys. Everybody sort of has to work together to be able to make a case, especially when you're in a trial situation.
Mhm.
And that's how we always worked. It was very much a team atmosphere and a family atmosphere. If we won, everybody won together. If we
Yes.
lost, we were all sad because we lost together. And we were willing to do whatever it took to get things done and help somebody else who needed help. And I think that atmosphere is just lacking right now. And I think it's real important to bring that back because you need to be able to hire quality people and you need to retain those people.
Exactly.
And if you can do those two things, then you will have a well-oiled machine working in that DA's office to move the cases through, to do it efficiently, to do it effectively.
When you decided to run for this position,
Mhm.
what other things, in addition to you seeing the inefficiencies and you seeing that the culture needs to be changed to be able to hire good talent and retain them, what are some other things that drew you to wanting to run for this position?
I think that I can do the job really well. One thing that I am proud of over my career is that I have been able to obtain and maintain good working relationships with everybody. And that is really important because the DA's job is about relationships. So right? It's not just necessarily about work. You have to have good working relationships with everybody in that criminal justice system. And that's got to be people at the jail, the sheriffs, law enforcement, defense attorneys. That has to be bail bonds companies, the county clerk, the district clerk. You have to have good working relationships with everybody in that system to be able to move the cases through again. And I know that I can do that because, you know, I've had instances where me and a law enforcement officer have been yelling and screaming at each other about things. And yet we still maintain a good working relationship, right? Because we don't take it personally. It's very hard to hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't hurt me and that's fine. If it helps to grow, I'm perfectly fine with that. So things don't hurt my feelings too much because I think you don't make your best decisions when you're being emotional. So it's real important to be able to maintain an even keel when working with people and don't take things so personally. The end goal is this going to be efficient or effective? If the
Yeah.
answer is yes, then we're going to do that. Right.
Right.
And the rest is just other things.
Right.
So I think I can do that really well and maintain those relationships and maybe bring some people back to get things going. And then I can work with the judges too, because, this is not something that's going to happen overnight.
Sure.
I don't get in there and then like 30 days later, oh, I fixed everything. It's going to be a long process. But again, it's going to require working with the judges to be able to get things done. I want to change the way we do some of the things to make it more efficient.
Well, with that said,
Mhm.
if we know it is not an overnight fix,
Mhm.
what type of goals will you set to be able to change that atmosphere and build those relationships? What do you think that looks like from a time standpoint? I know it's hard to say, I'm going to have this done in 6 months, but what realistically, how long do you think that would take before we can see some positive change in that office and we can see timely processing of these cases?
Mhm. So I think initially I would say probably within the first year, you're going to be able to see that those cases are going to be filed more quickly. Why? Because I can do that, right? Because I have that experience. I can get in there and help out in that regard as well on both ends, whether it's misdemeanors or whether it's felonies. Whoever needs the most help at that time, that's where I'm going to go.
Okay.
Right. And that's something that I can do on nights and weekends because I'm already used to doing that. That's how I work anyways. So I can help with that. I can also do grand jury, which means attorneys doing grand jury can go do other things, whether that's moving the trials along, going into court. I can also go into court too and help move those cases along. So not only me, but everybody else that works at the office, they're going to be required to have caseloads as well. I can't have a full caseload because some of the job is administrative and actually a lot of it is, but I can still help out, right? The first assistant can also help out moving the cases. Even if you're a supervisor there, whether you're the chief misdemeanor or chief felony prosecutor, you've got to have a caseload too. We just don't have enough people. We have so many cases. We've got to move those that everybody, it's an all hands on deck approach. So everybody's going to have those. So I think in the first year, you'll be able to see already that more cases are going to be going through.
Okay.
There's ways to make things a little bit more efficient for sure on the felony end. On felonies, you have a right to have your case go through a grand jury. And a grand jury is essentially just 12 citizens, from the county that sit and review several cases a day, like anywhere from 60 to 100 cases in one day. And that's how you get an indictment. If they think, yeah, there's enough evidence here, this case should go forward, it's called an indictment. And it's paper that tells the defendant what they're charged with. You don't have to do it that way, though, right? So a defendant, if they want to, and I'll give, for instance, I had a guy who got arrested for a forgery. He tried to pass a fake check at a bank, got caught. He had no criminal history whatsoever, never been in trouble his whole life. I know, the prosecution know, everybody knows that guy's going to get probation because he doesn't have a criminal history, right? So, I reach out to the DA's office. I say, look, I got this guy. He's been in jail at that point, maybe for 2 weeks. I said, hey, he knows he's guilty. He already told me the facts. Can you hurry that case along? We'll plea by information or get him to the grand jury. We'll plea, we'll get him out of the jail, right? No, they wait almost the 90 days, file the case, and then we go in and get a court date. And, why?
Yeah.
We wasted, that whole time. Again, we paid $92 a day to have him in there for something we all knew what the outcome was.
Yes.
You can do something by information. You don't take the case to the grand jury. Instead, a prosecutor fills out, it looks like an indictment, but it's called an information. And they don't go to the grand jury. They waive the process and they can get into court quicker. We should be doing that on very level offenses where we all know what the outcome is for people who don't have a long criminal history, who know that they're guilty and just want to get their case taken care of. You can move those people out a lot quicker. So I want to do that as well.
Okay. Well, hey, y'all, that was my interview with Lindy Beaty, Republican candidate for Ellis County District Attorney. I'm hoping that by now you are seeing why I am supporting Lindy in her candidacy for this office. She shared why she's running. She shared some of the inefficiencies with the office. I really hope that you will consider voting for Lindy in the upcoming election. Now, remember, part 2 of my interview with Lindy will be released next week. So stay tuned for that. Now, each week, we always end Patriots Revival with 2 things, our altar call and then our weekly scripture. This week's altar call is I want you to do some more research. Don't necessarily take my word for it. Hopefully this interview helped you, but do some more research. Go to Lindy's website, which is lindybeatyforda.com. And also she mentioned her Facebook page. Would love for you to research Lindy a little bit more and see for yourself if she is right for this role. I feel that she is. I would love for you to do your own research. And also I'm going to encourage you to attend the upcoming candidate forum in which Lindy and other Republican candidates for some of our local offices will be in attendance. As always, we will end this week with our weekly verse of Psalm 119:25, which says, "Revive me by your word." I'm hoping that the interview with Lindy revived your faith, revived your inner patriot so that you will want to get involved. That's all for this week. Stay tuned for part 2 of the episode with Lindy Beaty next week. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, Please follow us and tell others. If today's show revived your faith and your inner patriot, join the Patriots Revival Facebook group by going to facebook.com/groups/Patriots Revival for resources on how to get involved in being salt and light in a world of darkness. Are you local to the Ellis County, Texas area? If so, check out the Patriots Revival podcast, The Local Show, for info on local issues, candidates and elections, a calendar of events of conservative organizations in the area, and ways for you to get involved. Finally, if you would like to contribute to the production costs of the Patriots Revival podcast, you can do so through Zelle by inputting info@patriotsrevival.com as the recipient. Thanks again for listening. I hope you have a reviving week.